So it's pretty clear that King Philip didn't know nor care about labor laws, but when it came to historical accuracy, he's basically like Peggy when it comes to Spanish. Actually, he's like Peggy in a lot of ways.
You cannot pass in that horseless carriage and manner of dress, for they do not exist in our year 1590.
Why don't you cut the goofy talk and just open the gate?
Look, the Alamo bear guy was cool about it.
Hey folks, welcome to Squirrel Tactics. Like, subscribe, check out the Patreon, let's do this. Philip Motzinger, a former real estate agent, also known as King Phillip, voiced by acting legend Alan Rickman. He appeared in Joust Like a Woman, where he ran his own Renaissance fair that Buck Strickland wanted to get the propane contract for.
With all due respect, sir, do we really want propane mixed up in this sort of thing?
Last year I would have said hell no, but it's a new normal, Hank. You want a Christmas bonus this year? You sell them leotards every gallon you can.
I love how Buck refers to the Renaissance fair people as leotards here. Hank heads out to the fair in order to meet with King Philip.
Who goes there?
Hank Hill, Assistant Manager, Strickland Propane. I'm here to talk to, Philip Motzinger.
Ah, you mean King Philip.
And just to get this out of the way, England technically did have a King Philip. He was Felipe II of Spain, who married Mary I, Queen of England, and he was able to co-rule with her, though when she died in 1558, because Philip wasn't of the royal bloodline, he was sent packing back to Spain. There was also Metacomet, a Wampanoag chief best known for leading an alliance of tribes against settlers in New England during what is known as King Philip's War in the late 1670s. Who had adopted the name King Philip due to his, at one time, close relations with the English settlers. We also need to keep in mind here that the year the fair is set in is 1590, because this is important for quite a few things during the episode. And in case anyone was wondering, Elizabeth I was the actual English monarch in 1590. Anywho, Hank goes along with things, addresses the part, even riding in on a wagon with the propane tank sneakily hidden among the straw.
There was a lover and his lass, with a hey and a ho and a hey nonny no. Prithee, join me.
Just drive the cart.
And yeah, horned helmets like this weren't really a thing. It's way too easy to use one of those horns as a handle, though knights would sometimes wear ornate helmets for tournaments. Also, I see a lot of swords, but where are the firearms? Musketmen were a thing by 1590. Hell, the paper cartridge was invented by the mid-1580s, so why are there no firearms? I digress. Hank finally meets King Philip, and a slight thing here, Philip is standing on a catapult. And they should not have a catapult. Going back to the firearm thing, they had cannons. English use of cannons goes back at least to 1346 during the 100 Years' War.
King Philip, my liege, I bring a merchant who wishes to display his wares.
Hank Hill, Strickland Propane.
Ah, so you are keeper of the flame.
Assistant Keeper of the Flame.
So we meet Philip and we figure out why Buck was so gung-ho on getting this leotard's money.
Our kingdom is accepting bids from members of your guild. We require 1,000 stone a week of your magic gas. A stone is, in your native tongue, a gallon.
Okay, so a stone is a unit of measurement of mass. A stone is 14 pounds, by the way. Whereas a gallon is a unit of measure of volume, so the two do not equate. It'd be kind of like comparing a liter to a pound. They're completely different, and since this was 1590, the units of measure would have been under the exchequer standards put in place by Elizabeth I in 1588, meaning that it would have actually been in gallons. Hank wants to know what they're using 1,000 gallons of propane per week for, and when he sees his answer, he's pretty much in awe.
1,000 gallons a week? What are you fellas doing with it? That is the most beautiful thing I have ever seen. I tell ye what.
Yeah, it's I tell thee what, not ye. They didn't say ye. What people think is a Y is actually the archaic letter thorn that often looks like a Y but makes a TH sound. Also, this forearm version of the handshake is questionable at best, seeing as the oldest reference we could find to it is from the 1800s. Whether this was historically correct or not, a king wouldn't shake hands with a commoner. Oh, and Hank wouldn't be wearing a purple hat because it was illegal for anyone other than royalty to wear the color purple. And then Peggy adds in this.
Men in the Renaissance period often shook wrist to wrist to check for daggers, and because they did not use toilet paper.
Again, no evidence that this form of handshake plus the left hand was used if a hand was used for wiping, though they probably were closer to what the Romans used, which was a sponge on a stick. Anywho, Hank takes the family to the fair and introduces Peggy to King Philip, and Peggy does not make the best first impression.
Delighted.
Well, nice to meet you, Phil.
And she makes it even worse for herself when she mentions that the fair may not be historically accurate, which King Philip is not a fan of.
What inaccuracies dost thou mean?
I think you meant dost thou mean. And your British accent is really, really close.
So she's technically correct on the thou thing, and as far as his accent, well, the modern British accent didn't come into being until the late 1700s, early 1800s. So yeah, his accent is wrong. I will say that his pronunciations are for the most part correct, seeing as 1590 would have been towards the end of the Great Vowel Shift. Philip wants to discuss business matters in private, which is understandable.
We should not discuss matters of trade in the presence of the fairer sex. Let's away.
But come on now, you're not a pimp or a vampire, don't do the cape thing. Hank gives his sales speech while Philip is fed grapes, and when he notices some teenagers, Philip does this.
Hey dude, it's the king.
We wage war on France on the morrow.
That is so gay.
Okay, so in 1590, England was already at war, but with the Spanish. That's right, they were at war with Philip II, known as the Anglo-Spanish War. France, by the way, was in the midst of their own internal wars of religion between Catholics and Protestants. Philip brings up that Atherton had offered to beat Strickland's price, but Hank tells him that the difference between the two dealers is service, which piques Philip's interest.
I do demand proper service.
Then Strickland Propane is the place for you.
Dad, this is mead. I said grog.
I'm sorry,
Away!
Okay, grog did not exist until 1740. What is grog? Well, basically it's a mixture of rum and water. Typically 4 parts water, 1 part rum. So British sailors in the Caribbean were given a daily amount of rum. It wasn't much, and some sailors would accumulate several days worth in order to get drunk. Which, yeah, the British Navy was not a fan of. So Admiral Edward Vernon got the idea of mixing rum with water to dilute the rum, and because Vernon was known as Old Grog, due to him often wearing coats made from a material known as grog graham, his invention was called grog. Fun fact, Mount Vernon, you know, the home of George Washington, is named after Admiral Vernon due to Washington's older half-brother serving under Vernon during the War of Jenkins' Ear. So yeah, grog would not have been available in 1590. Philip wants Peggy to be one of his wenches, which makes sense considering how alike he and Peggy are.
A good wench is so hard to find. You're fortunate. Yours seems sturdy. If I had her in my employ, it would solidify the bond between our two kingdoms.
See, he is about as knowledgeable about life in 1590 as Peggy is about the Spanish language. And just as she hates when people correct her incorrect Spanish, Philip does not like being corrected when he gets something wrong. They both have pretty big egos and a tendency to abuse any amount of power that they're given. Hank takes Peggy to see Philip after she agrees to work at the fair, and yeah, we can tell that Philip has some ulterior motives here. He fully plans to try and break Peggy like a wild horse.
I am a Renaissance woman. This is a Renaissance fair. We are a perfect fit.
Delightful. I've got just the hole for this peg.
Hear ye, hear ye!
Hank and Peggy visit Human Resources to get her into a position, and it would not surprise me if this guy was one of Cotton's bastard sons.
You're pretty much looking at cleaning wench, stable wench, or butter churning wench.
Are you sure you don't have any openings for a queen? Warrior Princess?
No. I can go over the wenches again.
Notice how Peggy went straight for Queen and Warrior Princess? That's her ego talking, as is typically the case. I mean, it's Peggy. She wants to be royalty and even wants to know which of the wenches has the most power.
Is Cleaning Wench the highest ranking wench?
Highest? Yes.
Seriously, that guy has to somehow be related to Hank. He shows Peggy how to do her job, which consists of beating dirt out of a rug, then adding more dirt to beat out. And again, we see Peggy's ego hard at work.
Well, as back-to-back-to-back substitute teacher of the year, I may look far too intelligent to be a cleaning wench. I just hope people buy it.
We hear about just how ridiculous Philip can be from one of the other wenches.
Honey, you don't want the king to catch you breaking character. Once he put me on stable duty for humming an Elvis song.
And then we get Peggy's ego on full display, as rather than just do her job, which is to beat a rug, she has to bring attention to herself and break character. But yeah, it's 1590, so just beat the rug.
I am beating a rug. A very important job, for castles were oft drafted.
Wench, whom addressed thee?
I addressed myself.
One of the other wenches tries to stop her. I mean, seriously, she's clearly breaking character, which is a huge no-no, but Peggy's ego will not be stopped.
Peggy, hold thine tongue.
Right. In the future, they will invent a magical sucking device to free women from household drudgery.
If thou can foretell the future, perhaps thou art a witch.
Peggy being accused of being a witch attracts King Philip's attention as he and Hank come over to see what all the ruckus is about.
How now? Is there unrest in my kingdom?
She's a witch.
Well, I guess if they burn you at the stake, they'll be using my propane. You'll find it burns witches cleanly and evenly and at a fraction of the cost of natural gas.
Fun fact, typically people found guilty of witchcraft were strangled or hanged, it's hanged, not hung, before being burned at the stake because the punishment was to destroy the body. Now, if you were burned at the stake for treason, yeah, no, you were alive for that because the punishment was being burned alive. Anywho, Peggy decides to just throw kayfabe right out the window, that's known as defenestration, by the way, which King Philip is not at all happy about, but to his credit, he plays it off decently well.
You know, this cleaning wench thing isn't really doing it for me.
If her arms worked as hard as a serpent's tongue, there would be nary a speck of dust in the kingdom.
We hear more about Philip's unsavory business practices and straight-up sexual harassment from the wenches during their lunch break.
Why do the wenches always get the last lunch break?
Because Philip is an ass.
Speaking of which, he grabbed mine again this morning.
But he's your boss. That is sexual harassment.
Well, King Philip says that's all just tomfoolery.
And apparently his policies when it comes to pay may not be the most equitable. Okay, yeah, they are not equitable.
See Brandon over there? He started here a year ago. Makes twice as much as me.
So, first, you'd be surprised how many of these fairs, like haunted houses, rely heavily on volunteers. So it could be argued that, hey, at least she's getting paid, and we don't know for how long she's worked there. Plus, she is one of several wenches, whereas he is the executioner, which is a highlighted role that's gonna pay more. It shouldn't be double, but it's gonna be more. Also, executioners did not wear hoods, everybody knew who they were, and that's a double-sided battle axe, not an executioner's axe. This is an executioner's axe. Peggy takes it upon herself to address the wench's issues with the king because even with the previously made points, his pay structure is not fair nor particularly legal.
As the highest ranking wench, maybe I should talk to the king. It is time we rewrote history.
This conversation did not start off well, seeing as King Philip refused to break character.
Hey, Philip, you got a second? Oh, Mr. Motzinger? King Philip?
Oh, I'm sorry. I was just counting my treasure from the Americas. What is the reason for this interruption?
And he really stuck to those character guns because, well, he's a jackass.
One of the girls got out her laptop, and we went on some labor websites.
Laptop?
But Peggy pushes forward and gives examples of real issues that should be addressed. But again, Philip ain't breaking character.
And are you familiar with the Family and Medical Leave Act of 1993?
How could I be? It is but 1590.
Ultimately, this is a battle of egos. Peggy's ego versus Philip's ego, both of which are big enough to be shopping at H. Dumpty's. And it pains me to say this, but in this instance, Peggy is right.
Why don't you drop the act and you explain to me why the wenches make 70 cents on the dollar and the village idiot gets full dental?
You are but a woman, and I have given you enough of my time. Begone.
She leaves in a huff and runs into Hank, who tells her not to cause any issues with the king and to come to him to handle any issues she might have.
Whatever you do, don't open your mouth.
I can fight my own battles.
Mouth.
Peggy then instigates a rebellion against the king with the other wenches as a way to make Philip give in to their demands.
Now! Come on, throw!
I'm sorry.
And yeah, it doesn't work, because of course it doesn't work.
The One Wench Rebellion of 1590 has been quashed.
The other wenches depend on their paychecks to survive, and risking that paycheck would not be in their best interest. Even though, yes, they should be fighting for fair treatment. And to Peggy's credit, she takes full responsibility for the rebellion, and Philip sentences her to the stocks.
I wonder, madam, if I can expect the same impertinence from your husband's propanery that I have come to expect from you.
Please, Hank had nothing to do with this.
Guards, seize this wench and take her to the stocks.
Those are not stocks. That's what's known as a pillory. These are stocks which go on your legs like stockings. Okay, seriously, King Philip is basically the male Peggy Hill. Peggy accepts her fate at this point so as to not jeopardize Hank's sale, but Hank ain't having it, and he's willing to throw the sale away in order to protect his wife. Also, tomatoes would have been rather rare in England at the time, so people would not be throwing them.
Listen to your shrew. In her nagging, there is wisdom.
Dang it, there are more important things than a sale. You take off that crown. I'm kicking your ass.
And rather than fight like Hank wants, Philip has another idea.
Oh, you demand satisfaction? Fine. Then we shall joust by day's end.
Say, huh?
Again, partially to protect his ego, he picks a form of combat where he would have an advantage, seeing as he's actually jousted before and Hank hasn't.
If you are able to tilt me off my steed, then I will apologize to you and yon hag and purchase your gas. But if I should send thou tumbling to the dirt, then you and your gas will be banished from the kingdom. But not before your whiff cleans the man-sweat from my blouse.
So Philip lays down his terms and his shirt. By the way, this was how kings dressed around that time period, and I'm sure he has no doubts that he'll be victorious. Hank agrees to the challenge because he's Hank, and he does it in the most Hank way possible.
Fine. You are in for the joust of your life, mister. Yep, the joust of your life.
Come jousting time, Philip uses one of the wenches as a stepping stool to get on his horse, and Hank is given a crash course in jousting and horse riding.
I think you should know I've never jousted before. Or ridden a horse.
He'll do most of the work. Now, if he bucks you, make sure to cover your neck and your testicles.
I just want to point out Bobby's outfit here. It very much gives off Tartuffe the spry wonder dog vibes. And yeah, we see Hank be unhorsed by the king, who isn't exactly what we would call a good winner. But come on, does that really come as any surprise?
How does it feel to have lost the joust, your wench's honour and the propane account in one mighty thrust of my lance? It's a bitter taste, I'm sure, and ye shall savour it for 70 fortnights anon.
However, then Philip is himself unhorsed by a knight who turns out to be Peggy, which makes sense seeing as she, in one possible timeline, grew up on a ranch and was very capable with a horse. The wenches gather around him and he orders them to help him up, but instead they hand him something else.
Help me to my feet, you gaggle of magpies! What hand you me?
It's a lawsuit, honey.
And right here, I want to point out the greatness of Alan Rickman as we hear Philip's accent change as he's reading the lawsuit. It's a cool little detail, plus I'm glad they use the actual institutions like OSHA and the TWC.
Department of Labor, OSHA, Texas Workforce Commission. Crap, I'm gonna lose my fare. I don't want to go back to selling real estate.
And that's the last we see of Philip. I'm guessing he got sued and fined into oblivion and the fair shut down, which would end up costing everyone their jobs, so nobody really ended up winning here, I guess. But the episode does end on a pretty decent joke.
Prime directive has been breached. Women's liberation has happened too soon. I must warn the future.
Take me with you. I hate it here.
So, as I said earlier, Philip has a lot in common with Peggy. Both have huge egos, tend to overinflate their importance, and abuse any power that they're given. And Philip very much abuses his power, and the fact that he's pretty blatant and openly chauvinistic doesn't help. Another person Philip has a lot in common with, if you really think about it, is Ward Rackley. They both use fantasy worlds to hide their overall insignificance from themselves to a delusional extent, sometimes to the detriment of others. It would have been interesting to have Peggy run into Philip again when she became a real estate agent. Again, the two are rather similar, but as far as one-off characters go, King Philip is entertaining even if he's behind the times on a lot of his views. And to be fair, for 1590 he was kind of progressive. Yeah, at least nobody got hang, drawn, and quartered here.
But at Strickland Propane, our motto is, if you have a problem, tell us what it is, and we will try to take care of it as soon as we can.